Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're talking about something really specific. That feeling, where you pride yourself on being super independent.
Radically independent, even.
Right, totally self-sufficient. But then intimacy, vulnerability, that feels terrifying.
Like a genuine life or death threat. If that resonates, if that's you listening, then yeah, this deep dive is absolutely for you.
We're tackling what the sources call the avoidant paradox. This deep, kind of hidden tension for people with an avoidant attachment style.
And it's a tension that's really built on, well, a misunderstanding of what strength actually is. Looking across the research, this theme popped up again and again.
Which theme is that?
The idea that this avoidant lifestyle, this intense self-sufficiency, is actually true independence. The sources frame it not just as a myth, but an illusion.
An illusion. How so?
Well, one study described it not as a life of quiet freedom, but a life of constant struggle.
Struggle. That seems counterintuitive to the idea of independence. Yeah.
Right, because it requires this powerful, perpetual suppression of something incredibly fundamental, our innate attachment system. You're constantly pushing down a core human need.
Okay, so that's the paradox we need to sit with. If you are avoidant, you might look at yourself and see strength, see independence. But the data suggests you're actually burning massive amounts of energy every single day.
Just on these deactivating strategies, these
Yeah.
mental tricks to keep that need for connection buried.
It sounds exhausting, frankly, and the end result is often isolation.
Which brings us right to the biggest hurdle for change. These individuals, they overwhelmingly tend to assume that any dissatisfaction or loneliness or frustration in relationships, it's coming from outside.
The externalizing.
Yeah.
Always looking out there for the problem.
Exactly. It's always, I just haven't met the right person, or everyone I date is just too needy.
The classic, it's not me, it's you,
Yeah.
but applied systemically. Blaming the map because their internal compass is maybe a bit off.
Precisely. They get convinced the issue is just meeting the wrong people. Or they hold on to this fantasy that the one will magically appear and make connection effortless, no vulnerability required.
Which is just not how relationships work.
Not at all. And the literature is really clear on this. Until they can accept that their relationship issues stem from these internal patterns, until they look inward, or maybe get some professional help, real lasting change, it's just unlikely.
So that's our mission today. We're going to peel back those layers. We'll look at the psychology, the surprisingly specific brain stuff
The
happening.
neurophysiology, yeah.
And then map out practical steps, small steps, behavioral shifts, things you can actually do to foster vulnerability, build connection, and find that secure style.
A style that actually gives you both things. The closeness you might secretly crave, and the genuine, sustainable independence you value.
Okay, let's dig into that constant effort first. That internal battles you mentioned. What are these deactivating strategies? How do they manage to suppress something as powerful as the attachment system?
Well, there are loads of them, and they're often quite subtle. Think of them like mental firewalls designed to keep intimacy out.
Okay, examples.
Things like minimizing closeness right after a really good interaction. Maybe you have a great date, feel a connection, and then poof, radio silence for 3 days.
The pullback.
Exactly. Or intensely focusing on a partner's tiny flaws, the way they chew, a slight accent, some little habit that secure people barely notice. For the avoidant, it becomes this huge reason to create distance.
An excuse generator.
Totally. Or maybe even flirting with other people, not necessarily to cheat, but just to mentally diminish the importance of the current partner, keep them at arm's length.
It sounds like a toolkit for self-sabotage, designed to keep relationships stuck in the casual zone indefinitely.
That's a good way to put it. And one of the most powerful tools in that kit is the fantasy of the perfect partner.
The illusion of finding the one. How does that work as a deactivating strategy?
Oh, it's brilliant in a destructive way. People with this pattern can move really quickly from one date or even one serious relationship to the next.
Always searching.
Always searching, yeah. And they're driven by this unwavering belief that if they just keep looking, they'll find this mythical, flawless person, someone who won't trigger their fears, someone who requires zero emotional heavy lifting.
Which, of course, stops them from ever actually connecting with the real, imperfect human right in front of them.
Absolutely, because the moment real vulnerability pops up, or true intimacy starts to build, which it has to in any genuine relationship boom, they hit the eject button, they pull away.
And that pulling away, that reinforces their own story, right?
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The withdrawal proves to them, see, this person isn't the one, or look how needy they get when I just need space.
And if the partner reacts negatively to the withdrawal, like gets upset or anxious,
That just confirms the avoidance original belief relationships are smothering, or, see, people always want too much. I really am better off alone. It creates this deep, isolating loop, vicious cycle.
okay, that cyclical thinking, that constant justification for distance, that leads us to the psychological glue holding it all together.
Yeah.
You mentioned cognitive dissonance.
Yes, cognitive dissonance theory is fundamental here. The basic idea is that we humans, we crave consistency. We want our beliefs and our actions to line up.
Makes sense.
So if your core belief is, I'm strong, I'm independent, I don't need deep intimacy, but then you feel this pang of loneliness or this powerful urge for connection, those two things clash.
Belief versus feeling.
Right. And that clash creates intense psychological discomfort. That's the dissonance.
So to get rid of that uncomfortable feeling, they've got to change something. Either change the behavior, reach out, connect, or change the belief. Or rather, double down on the original belief.
And the avoidant pattern typically chooses the second path. Rationalize. Double down on, I don't need anyone.
How do they do that?
Dissonance reduction drives them to actively shape their world to confirm their existing beliefs. They'll seek out information that fits their narrative.
Like,
Maybe they spend hours reading articles praising radical independence, or they only follow social media accounts that celebrate being a lone wolf. Anything that says, you're right, being alone is best.
and just as importantly, they avoid anything that challenges that.
Critically, they actively steer clear of information or even people who might suggest connection is valuable or necessary. It's a massive confirmation bias machine running constantly.
And you said this isn't just an internal thing. It affects their social life, too. They kind of curate their friends.
Absolutely. Social groups become a key tool for managing dissonance. They tend to gravitate towards friends who also hold similar views on relationships, maybe friends who are also avoidant or highly independent.
So they all reinforce each other's stance.
Exactly. They get confirmation from their pals that their way of living is normal, even admirable. And this shapes what they talk about. Conversations stay surface-level work, hobbies, news. They rarely dive into deep emotional stuff.
Because that would risk creating dissonance again.
Precisely. It creates this self-reinforcing social bubble that constantly whispers, see, you're fine, you don't need that messy connection stuff. It shores up the isolation.
Okay, that covers the psychological defenses, the mental gymnastics. But often when someone avoidant faces closeness, the reaction isn't just a thought, it's visceral. It feels physical, like a genuine threat. Why does intimacy trigger panic or that urge to flee?
Yeah, that's where we need to zoom into the brain's hardware, specifically the emotional processing hub, the amygdala.
The threat detector.
Exactly. You can think of it like a psychological sentinel constantly scanning everything coming in through our senses. It's performing this nonstop neural surveillance.
And what's it looking for?
Trouble, basically. It asks these really primitive survival-focused questions. Is this something I fear? Does this smell like danger? Is this situation similar to something that hurt me or led to abandonment before?
And this isn't a slow, logical consideration. You said it's like a tripwire.
Instantaneous. If that tripwire gets hit, maybe because past experiences, childhood wounds, or just ingrained insecurity have wired the system to equate closeness with danger, the amygdala reacts before the thinking brain, the cortex, even gets a look in.
It just sounds the alarm.
It telegraphs a crisis message straight to the body. Fight, flight, freeze. That physical discomfort, that sudden urge to withdraw or shut down when someone gets too close. That's often the body registering danger based on the amygdala signal.
Wow. And this links into the polyvagal theory, right? This idea of neuroception.
Yes, absolutely. Polyvagal theory gives us a fantastic framework here. Neuroception is the term for how our nervous system subconsciously evaluates risk in the environment, including in social interactions.
Subconsciously, so we don't even know it's happening.
Most of the time, no. It's happening below the level of conscious thought. It's this constant neural surveillance, appraising people's facial expressions, their tone of voice, the situation. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? Is it life-threatening?
And these appraisals are based on?
Often they're hardwired through evolution and shaped by our personal history. If your system, based on past data, decides someone's slightly furrowed brow means criticism or attack is coming, your defensive systems start mobilizing before you even consciously think, oh, they look annoyed.
Okay, so the system's primed for threat. Now, for the opposite, for positive, warm social connection, you need a different system online.
You absolutely do. You need the most recently evolved circuit, evolutionarily speaking. It's called the ventral vagal complex, or VVC. This is the system that regulates the muscles in your face, your head, your voice box, even your heart, specifically to facilitate social behavior.
How does it do that?
Think about it. The VVC controls the tiny muscles around your eyes and mouth that create a warm smile or convey empathy. It controls your vocal cords to produce a soothing, melodic tone of voice rather than a flat or sharp one. It helps regulate your heart rate to keep you calm and present with others.
It's basically the neurobiological machinery of connection.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the safe and social system.
So here's the critical part. If the threat system, the amygdala, the fight or flight response, is activated,
Then the VBC, the social engagement system, has to go offline. They are biologically incompatible.
you can't be defensive and open at the same time.
Not on a physiological level, no. The core finding is that true social engagement requires the inhibition of those older defensive circuits, fight, flight, or even freeze shutdown. To let someone in, to be vulnerable, your nervous system has to feel safe enough to power down the defenses.
And for the avoidant person,
Their threat system is often so hyper-responsive to intimacy cues, so quick to sound the alarm when closeness happens, that the VVC, the part needed for warmth, empathy, reciprocal communication, just doesn't get a chance to fully engage.
so they literally might not be able to look warm or sound inviting in those moments.
Sometimes, yes, their facial expression might become flat or seem disinterested, their voice might lose its warmth. It's not necessarily intentional, it's their physiology stuck in a defensive state, which sadly often pushes partners further away, reinforcing the whole cycle.
Okay, so we've got this hyper-vigilant threat system constantly scanning, ready to shut down the very circuits needed for connection. It seems like the absolute first step has to be dialing down that internal alarm system, cultivating a sense of safety within. How on earth do you start doing that?
The research points quite strongly towards self-compassion as a starting point. It sounds maybe a bit soft, but the impact is profound and physiological. Practicing self-compassion actually seems to shift the underlying state of the nervous system. It helps move you out of that sympathetic threat defense mode, that constant feeling of being braced or on alert,
Right, the fight or flight readiness.
and into a state regulated by the parasympathetic nervous system, specifically the part linked to care and safety. You're essentially using kindness towards yourself to chemically and biologically signal safe to your own system.
You mentioned there's actual evidence for this. It's not just about thinking nice thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. There are studies measuring this. Participants guided through self-compassion exercises show measurable changes. For instance, lower levels of cortisol.
Cortisol, the stress hormone.
Exactly. Lower cortisol indicates less sympathetic activation, less of that stress response. The system is literally registering less threat. And perhaps even more telling, they show increased heart rate variability, or HRV.
What does HRV tell us?
Higher HRV is a key marker of parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest, or safe and social state. It indicates greater flexibility in the nervous system, more resilience, less defensiveness. Basically, people felt safer internally, and their biology reflected that. Kindness is a real biological intervention.
Okay, but let's be practical. For someone who's built their identity around fierce independence, maybe even harsh self-criticism, how do they do tender self-compassion? It sounds like a massive leap.
It does, so we break it down. The model often used has 3 core components. The first is simply kindness.
Kindness towards yourself.
Yes, it's about developing an attitude of wanting to comfort and soothe your own suffering, treating yourself with the same warmth and understanding you might offer a friend who's struggling. So when you notice yourself pulling away or shutting down, instead of the usual self-attack, I'm broken, I'm incapable of love,
You try something else.
you try curiosity and care. Maybe, wow, I'm feeling really scared right now, or this feels overwhelming and that's okay. What do I need to feel a little safer? It's a shift in internal tone.
Okay, kindness. What's the second part? You mentioned it tackles the isolation.
That's common humanity. This is incredibly important for avoidant patterns, which often involve feeling uniquely flawed or different. Common humanity is the wisdom component.
The wisdom, too.
To recognize that imperfection, struggle, making mistakes, feeling scared in relationships, this isn't a personal failing, it's part of the shared human condition. It directly counters that shame-filled thought, I'm the only one who feels this way, or there's something fundamentally wrong with me.
Realizing you're not alone in the struggle.
Exactly. It connects you back to others, even in your pain. Understanding that millions of people grapple with intimacy fears can be incredibly normalizing and reduce that isolating sense of shame.
Makes sense. And the third component.
Mindfulness. This is about being present with difficult feelings and experiences without immediately needing to fix them, suppress them, or run away from them.
So not judging the feeling, just noticing it.
Noticing it, acknowledging it, maybe even naming it. Ah, there's that fear of closeness again. Or, I feel the urge to withdraw. You validate that the feeling is real, it's happening, but you try to observe it with a bit of space rather than being totally consumed by it or instantly acting on it.
So it's about staying present with the discomfort.
Staying present with a loving awareness. It's acknowledging the reality of your internal experience. Yes, this avoidance pattern causes me pain, without immediately launching those deactivating strategies to numb it out. It builds tolerance for uncomfortable feelings.
Okay, so self-compassion starts to build that internal safety net. Then comes the really hard part, right? Actually looking inward, challenging that carefully constructed identity of perfect independence. This involves finding authenticity, which sounds painful for adults.
It often is. One of the sources had this really poignant observation. It said that self-acceptance and spontaneity are among the easiest achievements for healthy children. They just are themselves.
Yeah, kids don't usually agonize over their identity.
Exactly. But for adults, especially self-questioning, self-improving adults, those same qualities, self-acceptance, spontaneity, become the most difficult things to achieve. We develop all these layers, these ideas about who we should be.
And the pressure to be perfectly competent, totally self-reliant, never needy, that becomes this impossible standard, especially for the avoidant type.
An impossible standard often maintained by shame.
Ah, shame. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, the research is pretty clear. Shame is universal. It's a fundamental human emotion, apparently absent only in those individuals who lack the capacity for empathy or connection.
And what is shame at its core?
It's fundamentally the fear of being unlovable, the fear of disconnection, the deep-seated worry that if people really saw us, flaws and all, they would reject us.
So the avoidant logic goes, if I never let anyone get truly close, if I never show my vulnerabilities, then they can't see the parts of me that might be flawed or unlovable, and therefore I'm safe from rejection.
That's the perceived safety, yes. But the sources challenge this directly and powerfully. One researcher put it starkly. The less we talk about shame, the more control it has over our lives.
Keeping it secret gives it power.
Exactly. And while embracing vulnerability, letting people see the real you is risky, no doubt about it.
There's always a chance of getting hurt.
Always. But the argument is that it's profoundly less dangerous, less damaging in the long run, than giving up on love, belonging, and connection altogether. The small risk of rejection when you dare to be vulnerable is always less existentially damaging than the guarantee of lifelong isolation if you never try.
That's a powerful reframe. This deep fear, this drive for perfect control and distance, it also connects to a fascinating, deeper existential idea you found. Something about neurosis and immortality.
Yeah, this was a really thought-provoking concept from one source. It suggested that neurosis, particularly the kind involving intense control and withdrawal, like in avoidance, can be seen as a striving for an individual religion.
An individual religion.
Meaning, an attempt to achieve a kind of self-made immortality, a perfectly controlled existence. And this striving is fueled by a failure to be consoled by shared human experience, by connection.
So, by staying isolated and in perfect control, the avoidant tries to create this unassailable reality where they're the hero, immune to the messiness and pain that comes with depending on others.
That's the idea. It's an attempt to conquer the vulnerability of being human by retreating into a fortress of self, guarding against the chaos and potential suffering of interdependence. It's a deep existential defense mechanism.
Wow. Okay, so to start dismantling these really deep patterns, to bring some clarity when conflicts inevitably arise, you mentioned a tool, the parent-adult-child model, or PAC.
Yeah.
How does that help reconstruct the narrative?
The PAC model from transactional analysis is described as an efficient sorting device. It's designed to help make sense of chaotic, intense emotional reactions and interactions.
How does it sort things?
By giving people a shared language to talk about different internal ego states, instead of just seeing yourself and your partner as monolithic you and me, you start to see different parts operating within each person. The parent state, the adult state, and the child state.
Okay, break those down quickly.
Sure. The parent state contains the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors learned from parents or authority figures. It can be critical or nurturing. The adult state is the rational, objective, here and now processor of information. And the child state holds the feelings, impulses, and experiences from our own childhood. It can be spontaneous and fun, or fearful and wounded.
So how does applying this change a conflict? Let's use the example of an avoidant partner withdrawing after a fight. and the other partner feeling abandoned.
Okay. Without PAC, the abandoned partner might lash out from their own hurt child state, maybe saying something like, you always run away, you don't pair, which likely triggers the avoidance, defensive parent, or scared child state.
Right. Accusation leads to defense. Escalation.
Exactly. Using PAC, the abandoned partner might learn to communicate differently. They might say, when you go silent after we argue, my child state feels really scared and abandoned. That's an old, painful recording from my past playing.
So they're owning the feeling is coming from a specific internal state linked to the past, rather than just blaming the partner's current behavior.
Precisely. This makes it much easier for the avoidant partner to hear it without immediately going into defense mode. They might be able to respond from their adult state, okay, I understand your child state feels scared when I withdraw, instead of reacting defensively. They start discussing the dynamics between the states, rather than just attacking each other as people.
It shifts the conversation from blame to understanding the mechanics of the interaction.
Yes. And a really key discovery, especially for the avoidant person, often comes when they realize two things. First, that their partner's seemingly needy or demanding behavior often comes from that partner's own wounded child state.
Seeing the vulnerability underneath the behavior.
Exactly. And second, realizing that their own parents, the ones who might have modeled withdrawal or criticism, also had their own painful child state recordings driving their behavior.
So seeing their parents not just as powerful authorities, but as people who are also struggling with their own stuff.
Right. That realization can be incredibly powerful. It neutralizes the old power dynamics. It replaces judgment. My partner is needy. My parents were cold. With a shared understanding of common human struggles and learned patterns. It builds empathy right where the defenses are usually strongest. It's the antidote to isolation.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork. Self-compassion for safety, the PAC model for insight. But like you said earlier, insight isn't enough. Connection is about action. How do we translate all this understanding into actual, reliable, day-to-day behavior changes, especially when that ingrained instinct is still to pull away?
This is where we really need to put on our behavioral science hats. We shift focus from just changing feelings or mindsets, which can be really fleeting, to actively engineering the environment and routines.
Engineering the environment.
Yeah. Behavior change, according to this perspective, happens most effectively when you change the contingencies of reinforcement. Basically, make the desired behavior easier and more rewarding, and the undesired behavior harder and less rewarding. We have to look at the concrete things that trigger avoidance and make connection difficult.
So it's like applying habit formation principles, the kind people use for diet or exercise, but applying them to vulnerability and connection.
Exactly that. We need to consciously design our routines and spaces to support the new goal. The key principle is reducing friction for the good habits we want to build, like small acts of vulnerability, staying present, sharing a feeling.
Make it easier to do the right thing.
Make it as easy as possible. And at the same time, we need to increase friction for the old, unhelpful habits like automatic withdrawal, shutting down, isolating.
Make it harder to slip back into the old pattern. Could you give some concrete examples of increasing friction for withdrawal?
Sure. Let's say someone's pattern is to come home, grab a beer, and immediately retreat to their den or home office, shutting the door. Increasing friction might mean, well, literally agreeing to keep the beer in a harder-to-reach spot, maybe the back of the fridge behind the vegetables.
Seriously.
It sounds trivial, but that tiny bit of extra effort, that small pause, can sometimes be just enough for the conscious adult brain to intervene and say, wait, maybe I'll just check in with my partner for 5 minutes first.
Okay, so small physical barriers. What else?
It could be changing the home setup. If there's a specific escape chair or room, maybe agree to use that room only for specific tasks, like work, not for general avoidance, or designating a specific place far from the main living area where the phone goes during relationship time.
Creating deliberate obstacles to the autopilot withdrawal.
Exactly. Even a little bit of friction can make the difference between choosing the new desired behavior, connection, or defaulting back to the old, easy one, isolation.
Okay, so that's making withdrawal harder. Now, the other side. Reducing friction for vulnerability. This seems like the really tricky part for avoidance. You mentioned the 2-minute rule.
Yes, the 2-minute rule is absolutely crucial here. Avoided individuals often have this all-or-nothing thinking about vulnerability. They imagine it has to be this huge, dramatic, soul-bearing confession, which feels terrifying and impossible.
So the threat system slams on the brakes.
Instantly. The 2-minute rule says, Downscale the desired habit until it takes less than 2 minutes to do. Make it so small, so non-threatening, that the internal alarm system doesn't go off.
What does a 2-minute vulnerability even look like for someone petrified of intimacy? It's clearly not, I love you or I'm terrified of losing you.
Definitely not at first anyway. It's about replacing a typical deactivating behavior, like silence or distraction, with a tiny, brief bid for connection. Okay, instead of walking in the door, grunting hello, grabbing a smack, and vanishing, the 2-minute habit might be stopping for a moment, making eye contact, and saying something simple like, hey, work was intense today, feeling a bit drained, or saw something funny on the way home that made me think of you, or even just, how was your afternoon?
So a tiny expression of internal state, or a simple sign of connection or interest.
Exactly. It's small, it's safe, it takes minimal effort, but it communicates presence and acknowledges the other person. It shows the partner you're on my mind, which directly counteracts the usual deactivating pattern of seeming indifference. You practice that consistently.
Okay, start super small, get that 2-minute habit locked in, then what? How do you build momentum without triggering the overwhelm again?
That's where the Goldilocks rule comes in. It's all about maintaining engagement by working on challenges that are just right. Not too hard, not too easy.
Keep it interesting, but achievable.
Precisely. Once the initial 2-minute habit feels comfortable, you need to advance, but only slightly. The research suggests we stay most motivated when we tackle tasks that are roughly 4% beyond our current abilities.
4%.
That's specific. It's a guideline, obviously, not a hard rule. But the point is, the increments need to be small. If you've mastered sharing a simple thought for 2 minutes, maybe the next step is sharing a slightly more vulnerable feeling for 2 minutes. I felt a bit anxious about that meeting today.
Manageable difficulty.
Yes. Working consistently in that Goldilocks zone, challenging yourself just enough to stay engaged, but not so much that you get overwhelmed and shut down, is key to building momentum and gradually expanding your capacity for connection. It helps you achieve a state of flow towards security. #TACHAC-B, the practice of secure communication.
Okay, let's bring these ideas into real relationship dynamics, moving from those automatic, deactivating habits to more secure ways of communicating, especially during conflict. Yeah, the example of Henry and Georgia.
Right. Henry was the partner with the avoidant style. Georgia leaned more anxious. The first big step for them after gaining some self-awareness was recognizing how their default patterns were actually making things worse for both of them.
What did they realize?
Henry saw that his go-to strategies like making sarcastic jokes about Georgia's needs, ignoring her calls when he felt pressured, basically shutting down were his way of deactivating, but they actually fueled Georgia's anxiety and made her pursue connection even more intensely.
Which then made him withdraw more, the classic anxious avoidant dance.
Exactly. And Georgia, for her part, realized that her protest behavior, maybe getting overly dramatic, picking fights, trying to force connection when she felt ignored, while understandable as an attempt to get his attention, actually triggered Henry's core fear of engulfment and pushed him further away.
So insight led to seeing the counterproductive cycle.
Yeah.
How did they shift the communication?
They started trying to talk about the underlying needs and fears using more secure language rather than just reacting to the surface behavior.
Like using the PAC model, maybe?
Potentially, yes. Or just expressing the need more directly but calmly. A key moment came when they could actually share perspectives without blame. Henry was able to explain why he didn't call during the day.
What was that?
He explained that it wasn't because he didn't care or wasn't thinking of her. He often was thinking of her. But when he was deep in focused work, the idea of stopping for a phone call felt like a massive mental disruption that overwhelmed him.
So it wasn't personal rejection. It was about his work process and managing overwhelm.
Exactly. And hearing that, knowing she was still in his mind even when he was busy, was hugely reassuring for Georgia. At the same time, she could then clarify her need wasn't necessarily for long chats, but just for some signal of connection during the day, so she didn't feel completely cut off.
And they found a compromise.
Yeah, they negotiated something manageable for both. Maybe a quick text message check-in during a coffee break rather than a full phone call. It met Georgia's need for reassurance and respected Henry's need for focused work time. Small, secure negotiation.
This really highlights something crucial from the sources. This myth that secure couples never fight. That's not true, is it?
Not at all. All couples fight, even the most secure ones. The fundamental difference isn't the presence of conflict, it's how they navigate it. Handled securely, conflict can actually strengthen the bond.
So what's the core secure tactic during disagreement?
It's about trying to maintain focus on the specific problem at hand Rather than launching into global character attacks, you never. And maybe the most crucial element is recognizing that your partner's concern, their feeling, is real and valid to them, even if you don't agree with their interpretation or how they're expressing it.
Which leads to validation and respect.
Absolutely. Those are the powerhouse tools for de-escalation.
Huh.
Simply conveying that you're listening and that you can see things from their perspective, even if you don't fully agree, is incredibly disarming.
What does that sound like in practice?
It can be as simple as saying, okay, I hear that you're really upset right now, or I can understand why you felt hurt when I said that, or help me understand your perspective on this. It validates their emotional reality without you necessarily conceding your own point.
Signals, I'm listening, I care about your feelings.
Yes. When Henry started using language like that, really trying to hear the feeling beneath George's protest, she felt seen, and her need to escalate naturally decreased. And, of course, another huge part of secure repair is taking responsibility.
Owning your part. Apologizing. Which must be hard for someone invested in being perfectly independent and competent.
It can be incredibly hard because admitting fault challenges that defensive self-image, but a genuine apology, taking ownership when you are in the wrong, is like hitting a reset button. It instantly rebuilds trust and safety.
And doing this consistently helps counteract that other destructive pattern mentioned, the underestimation of intent.
Exactly. That finding was stark. Unhappily married couples underestimate their partner's positive or loving intentions by 50%.
50%, that's huge.
It is. The avoidant partner, especially, might default to assuming the other person is being deliberately demanding, critical, or trying to control them. Practicing validation, respect, and assuming good intent, or at least seeking to understand the intent, helps correct that negative filter. It retrains the brain to see the partner not as an adversary, but as someone who likely also wants connection, even if they express it clumsily. Tag C, addressing perpetual problems, the dreams.
Okay, so we're learning to communicate better, validate, repair. But the sources also make this really important distinction between problems you can actually solve, like, whose turn it is to do the dishes.
Right, the solvable ones.
And these other issues that are called perpetual problems. What are those?
Perpetual problems are the ones that are basically baked into the relationship because they stem from fundamental differences in personality or values or core emotional needs. They're the conflicts that tend to come up again and again, maybe in different forms over years.
Like what kind of differences?
Yeah. It could be a fundamental difference in emotional style. One person is very expressive, the other very reserved. Or differences in managing money spender versus saver, or core needs around socializing versus alone time. These aren't things you just fix, they're part of who you are as a couple.
So realizing that some conflicts are perpetual is actually helpful. It stops you feeling like you're failing because you can't resolve them.
Immensely helpful. Just knowing that this particular clash is built in can lower the frustration. It stops you from thinking, we must be fundamentally incompatible, or why can't we ever solve this? You realize it's just a core difference you need to manage, not eliminate.
Okay, so if you identify a conflict as perpetual, one of these gridlocked issues, and you know you can't solve it,
Yeah.
what is the goal when you talk about it?
The goal shifts completely. It's no longer about finding a solution to the surface issue. It's about understanding the dream that underlies each person's rigid position.
The dream. What does that mean?
The dream refers to the deeper meaning, the core need, the personal history, or the fundamental value that's being expressed or protected through that person's stance on the issue. The actual topic, the money, the schedule, the vacation choice, often becomes almost irrelevant. The real work is uncovering why it matters so much to each person.
Can you give an example? Let's use that classic avoidant need for alone time again. Partner A, avoidant, needs a night alone each week. Partner B feels rejected. Surface issue. Scheduling. What are the potential dreams?
Okay. Partner A's dream might not actually be about rejecting partner B at all. It might be about a deep, maybe lifelong need for experiencing unencumbered selfhood, a space where they feel totally free and competent, perhaps because they felt controlled or suffocated in the past. Or maybe it's just how they recharge their batteries to be a good partner.
And partner B's dream, fueling the feeling of rejection.
Partner B's dream might be rooted in past experiences of abandonment, leading to a core need to feel consistently connected and prioritized. Their dream might be about never feeling forgotten or always knowing I matter most. See how those deeper needs clash.
Yeah, the need for autonomy clashes with the need for secure attachment. So the goal isn't to decide who's right about the schedule.
No. The goal is for each partner to understand and crucially honor the other person's underlying dream. The listener's job in this conversation is to suspend judgment entirely. Don't argue about the surface issue.
What do you do instead?
You become like a curious, supportive friend. You ask gentle questions to help your partner explore their dream. Tell me more about why that feeling of freedom is so important to you, or what does it symbolize, or where do you think that need comes from?
You're helping them articulate the hidden meaning.
Exactly. And when both partners feel like their fundamental dream has been heard, understood, and respected, even if the needs still clash, it takes the emotional charge out of the conflict. Then, finding a practical compromise on the behavior, maybe it's not a whole night, but a dedicated afternoon or specific rituals of connection before and after the alone time, becomes much, much easier. You manage the difference with mutual empathy.
That sounds like a really advanced level of secure relating, understanding the dream beneath the issue.
It is. It requires vulnerability and trust. And this whole process, learning to connect, exposing those dreams, accepting the risks, brings us back to that fundamental tension Freud pointed out about love and suffering.
Right, the idea that seeking love brings the greatest joy.
Yes, Freud suggested that placing love at the center of life offers potentially the most potent experience of overwhelming pleasure. It taps into that deep, passionate human striving for happiness and fulfillment through connection. It's what we're wired for.
But there's always a but.
The unavoidable flip side, the weakness of this approach, as he put it, is that we are never so undefended against suffering as when we love.
We open ourselves up to the greatest potential pain.
Exactly. We are never more vulnerable, never more potentially desolate than when we risk losing the person we love or their love for us. That deep avoidant impulse, that drive for radical independence and control. While ultimately isolating and counterproductive, you can see it as this desperate, deeply human attempt to shield oneself from that fundamental vulnerability, that terrifying risk inherent in loving fully. Hashtag 40, conclusion and final thought.
So reflecting on everything we've covered, this journey from avoidant patterns towards secure connection,
Yeah.
it's definitely demanding, but there seems to be a clear path laid out in the sources.
Yeah, the steps are identifiable. It really starts with moving beyond blaming external factors and taking that courageous look inward.
Then actively cultivating that inner safety, primarily through self-compassion, to dial down the threat system.
Followed by translating insight into action engineering, those small, practical steps towards vulnerability. Using things like friction reduction for avoidance and the 2-minute rule for connection, making it doable.
And finally, practicing those secure communication skills, especially during conflict, focusing on validation, understanding the partner's perspective, taking responsibility, and looking for the dream beneath perpetual problems.
Exactly. It's a multi-layered process, touching on internal state, behavior, and interaction patterns.
And the payoff, the ultimate game, if someone undertakes this work.
It's profound, really. The sources suggest that when this shift happens, both partners win. The relationship stops being this draining, vicious cycle
And becomes
a mutually beneficial bond built on security. If there's an anxious partner involved, they finally get the consistent closeness and reassurance they crave. And the avoidant partner, they get to enjoy much more of the genuine, sustainable independence they need.
not the exhausting, illusory independence they were fighting so hard to maintain before.
Precisely. It's independence within connection, which is ultimately much more resilient and fulfilling than isolation.
You know, this whole conversation about balancing independence and connection within a relationship, it really echoes larger societal questions, doesn't it? Like the balance between individual freedom and the needs of the group or civilization itself.
That's a fascinating parallel. One of the sources touched on this, drawing on Freud, actually. The observation was that pure, absolute individual liberty was probably greatest before organized civilization.
When everyone was truly independent.
Yes, but that liberty was also largely worthless. The lone individual was constantly vulnerable, barely able to defend themselves or their freedom.
Right. Strength in numbers.
Exactly. As civilization develops, as we form groups and relationships, individual liberty necessarily undergoes restrictions for the sake of mutual protection and benefit. And justice, in this view, requires that everyone accept some of these constraints.
So, choosing connection, whether in a relationship or a society, means accepting some limits on absolute freedom for a greater collective good.
It does. And this frames the core challenge for the avoidant pattern in a larger context. It's not just about struggling with a partner's perceived closeness. It's, in a way, about grappling with the fundamental requirements of belonging itself, defending that claim to radical individual freedom against the necessary interdependence of any healthy human system.
Which leaves us with a really potent final thought for everyone listening, especially those who resonate with that deep pull towards independence.
The question becomes, how do we reconcile the necessary constraints and compromises of connection, the civilization of a relationship, with that powerful, deep-seated impulse for absolute individual freedom? How do we ensure the limits we accept, the vulnerabilities we risk, genuinely lead to mutual defense, shared happiness, and a form of interdependence where the self isn't lost, but actually strengthened?
It's not about giving up independence entirely, but perhaps redefining it, finding that balance where you can be a whole independent self while thriving within the safety and support of connection. That's the deep work.